Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next session. I'm Alex Young. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Work Truck Solutions. We spend a lot of our time and energy each day building technology that helps commercial dealers move inventory faster, serve your customers better, run smarter operations. And so today I'm really excited to talk about marketing. So it takes me a little bit out of my lane. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But I think it's something that we all spend a lot of our time and energy thinking about each and every day, how to build a bigger and brighter business. It's a little atypical, but actually here at Work Truck Solutions, I run our Convoy, our national marketplace's organic and paid marketing strategy. So I find myself constantly reevaluating what we do, how we do it. And so selfishly, I'm kind of excited to hear a little bit more from the group we have on the call today. And I'm hopeful that you guys all take a point home back to your day-to-day operations. So this session is, as I mentioned, a lot about marketing. It's about looking at how really AI, the buzzword that's out there in every single department now, is really changing the process in that realm. How is it really helping redefine ROI, a better customer experience, and really how do we make use of it tomorrow morning? Because I think at the end of the day, the businesses that lean into this, you can't really put AI back or avoid it at this point. So the businesses that really lean into it, I think, are going to be the ones that aren't just more efficient, but actually earn more market share. And that's something that every OEM, every upfitter, every dealer is always looking at and evaluating, right? So our theme, as you've probably heard through other sessions, is all about turning blind spots into profit centers through intelligence. And so a lot of what you'll hear today is, how do we find the things that we don't see every day? How do we, look at the customers that don't get the right response, the shopper who asked ChatGPT a question and never made it to your website, a campaign that doesn't get proper attribution, the customer experience that kind of falls off through different transitions. Really looking at not just how AI can come in and try to automate our workflow, but really how does it help shine a light into those blind spots and turn them into revenue for everyone here. So without further ado, I want to dig right in with those we've got here on the call. We've got three very sharp minds on this virtual stage. So first, I would like to have Yalda. Would you mind giving everybody a little bit of your background?
Yes, thank you very much, Alex, and very nice to be here again on this summit with everyone. I'm Yalda Ghorashy. I've spent 21 years on the OEM side, mainly running digital and digital marketing and dealer programs. I was at Stellantis for many years. For the past year, I have been working as a strategic advisor to various tech companies, and have just founded and launched a new AI first company for media management for dealers called Magnify Media.
Everything we look forward to hear from today. Alyssa, what about yourself?
Yeah, great to be here today. I'm Alyssa Smith. I'm the Director of R&D for Search and Generative Engine Optimization at Power Digital Marketing, which is a tech-enabled marketing firm. And really, I work with brands across multiple industries and at all stages of growth to really understand how the search landscape is really evolving, and especially how buyers are discovering and evaluating options and what that ultimately means for business performance, and really translate those shifts into strategies that help brands adapt and stay competitive and just capitalize on all of these emerging technologies and shifting behaviors.
Love it. And then what about you, Sam?
Hey everyone, I'm Samee Khan, the founder CEO of PAM AI. At PAM, we're building an AI workforce, primarily tailored towards solving all the communications problems. We like to say that dealers are the experts at the physical door, right? When someone comes through your doors, you know exactly what to do. You train your staff on it. But oftentimes the digital doors are neglected. And so we have agents that are ready to serve on all of those fronts. And we primarily started off with answering inbound calls. and having that receptionist agent. But again, this is a workforce, and AI is going to take on more and more jobs in addition to what they do alongside their human teams. And one thing that we haven't formally launched, maybe this is the quiet launch, soft launch, is our marketing agent. And very excited to talk about that more. We serve over 700 dealers nationwide and in Canada, mainly on the passenger side. But this technology is applicable to all, and so excited to share more about it.
Love it. So hopefully if you're listening here, you're hearing you've got three different kind of perspectives from the paid side, organic, GEO, AEO, and even sort of the actual marketing operations once that lead comes in, how it's going to get worked. So hopefully you stay tuned and take a lot from the different perspectives that we'll kind of cover as we dive in. As is the case in other sessions, feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll do our best to address them as they come in, and we'll leave some time at the end for any other questions. So don't be shy. So Samee, Yalda, Alyssa, thanks again for joining us, and let's dive in. So yes, we're going to spend a lot of time on AI, but I wanted to just kind of ground the group in each of our perspectives with respect to where are we at now? When we, everybody could add another AI technology tool, but if it doesn't meet a need, if it doesn't have a use case, if it doesn't have a problem, I think it may not get the same ROI that the dealer might look for. So really curious to hear from each of you guys. We'll just go around the room and just kind of see what's working, what do you hear it's working, what's broken, what's keeping people up at night. Just give a view from where you're sitting, what trends you're kind of noting, and that will kind of help us level set the rest of the conversation. Yalda, I'll kick it back over to you again.
Sure. Happy to get it started. From the perspective of the OEM, the main concern is obviously brand positioning. And from there, they focus a lot on managing demand and market share. They use tools like pricing levers. And basically that is the issue, just working on the brand positioning, the quality, pricing, etc. When it comes to dealers, the market has shifted quite a bit. And on the dealer side, their new reality is margin compression and pricing pressures. It's a very competitive market right now. We don't have the same issues that we had a few years ago with scarcity of inventory, etc. You also have new challenges at the dealer level when it comes to vendor and agency. There is this whole phenomenon of agency overload. The average dealer in the US is working with 18 to 25 providers in the marketing space. They manage their tech stack, and they each create unique silos as they support the dealer business. And then thirdly, there's a shift in how customers are buying. I'm sure that Alyssa will touch on that. Customers search differently. They look for vehicles differently. They find them differently. And when the customer comes in store, there's a lot of inefficiencies that I'm sure Samee will touch on related to process management. The issues that I named, they'll have something in common. And in general, what connects all of these is that dealers don't own their own data. They are essentially allowing third parties to manage their data and manage it. And with not having access to data, they don't have access to results. And as a result, they're flying a little bit blind. And that is the challenge that is really hard to solve for. And I think it ties in also a little bit into the theme of this summit, which is if you're flying blind, you can't really be, driving results.
Yeah, for 100%. So I'm excited to keep digging in on that, and maybe Alyssa, a little bit from you. Again on the search side, what do you see in there? What has changed over the last maybe 18 months, maybe even more so than the last decade in terms of SEO and what's kind of changing from your vantage?
Yeah, I mean, 18 months, I think we can talk about the last 2 weeks and it'll be a whole different world. But I think, Yalda kind of touched on this, but I think really the change that's happening is so much in top of funnel, that discovery, and then that's really having such a knockoff effect in terms of those downstream workflows. And I think the biggest shift overall is really just search has moved from category, more to that context. So buyers, used to search more around like a specific or a more broad term, whether that's like box truck or something generic. And now it's really specific, really contextually driven, really personalized, where a lot more of that use case, that budget, that location, those requirements are all kind of being baked into that pre-consideration and that earlier discovery and conversation. And at the same time, those conversations are happening more and more with AI search interfaces. So even if they're in a traditional engine like Google that has AI overviews, that has AI mode, or they're directly in ChatGPT or Perplexity, and so much more of that is now not returning a long list of links. It's returning one answer or a short list of 2 or 3 options. And so that's just fundamentally really shifting that dynamic of a short list that used to be built by the buyer, and they'd compare and they'd make those multiple options and compile really based on their own preferences. Now that short list is really being built for them. And, even before they're visiting a site or a dealer or any of that, if your content isn't showing up within that level of specificity or with that information, you're just not included in those conversations. And so that's a really big lost opportunity. If you're not, showing up within those early consideration phases, nothing is really going to happen down the road because you're just not even being considered. And that's just an entire loss.
Yeah, no, I spend a lot of time actually talking with your team and just more broadly trying to research to stay in that, because it feels a little bit threatening when you don't see the traffic numbers growing, and but it is the reality that you've just got to continue to adapt. So Samee, let's close the loop with you. You're kind of living at that intersection of the conversation and those leads that come through from these marketing activities, whether it's paid or organic. What are you kind of seeing as the level set, and what's keeping folks up at night?
Yeah, the theme behind AI these days is that it allows you to do what you ideally would have done if you could with people, right? Ultimately, that's the constraint that it's destroying, is that if I know what my best person can do, I just wish I could have them everywhere. And obviously we can't do that. And so we're using AI to bridge that gap. And so as Alyssa pointed out, there's folks who are coming in with highly contextual, information, right? They're honing in a lot more than they used to. And then what the AI can do is, once they enter that funnel, is that give them a personalized, very tailored, catered to them experience where we know exactly the information that they're coming in with, and we can now have that conversation. And then the next unlock is that we can do that extremely fast, right? And so speed to lead is extremely important. We know that when leads come in, that they only stay hot for a very short amount of time, right? Some data suggests that after about 7 minutes, the quality of a lead or their ability to convert can drop by 50%. And so that's where we're seeing the impact really being driven, is that as soon as that lead comes in through one of these digital doors, right? Like imagine someone does a form fill, they're really interested in that moment. If they had to wait 15, 30, an hour, right, before someone gets back to them, they're going to be less interested than if right then and there you had an AI not just get back to them really fast, but take it to the next level, do it in the most engaging way, which is give them a phone call, right? Most folks don't actually know that you can do so in a compliant way today, where you can actually have the AI go and engage them with a phone call. And whether it gets the result itself or not, you've got that customer now in front of you. Maybe all the AI has to do is warm transfer it into one of your reps, right? And so that's where we're seeing the needle really being pushed today. That consistency in quality and in speed to getting back to leads when they come in.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a ton of sense. We periodically, or I have to periodically, basically mystery shop, if you will. It's not necessarily a mystery shop, but I end up using this service just to see how it works and see what that engagement looks like. And it is pretty. There are definitely a high degree of differences between different dealer operations. And then I think you couple that with what Alyssa just mentioned. Imagine that customer having that really deep shopping or contextual search, and getting a lot of information, and then wanting to they're motivated, they're ready to go, and then it hits kind of an ice bath. So makes a ton of sense. So I think for we've got a little bit of the lens. Then we've got pricing pressure, data fragmentation or lack thereof. You've got search that's evolving, leads that may still not quite get handled as effortlessly and efficiently as the customer may desire. But then I'd like kind of let's flip the lens, right? And let's dive in on some of the things we wanted to get, because technology, AI, it obviously dealers, there's 1,000 vendors out there that they could talk with and different strategies that can be deployed. It's not always going to just mean transformation. Sometimes it can just be cluttered. It can be another bill, another invoice. So really being intentional. So I'm curious, where we're all seeing dealers feel like technology is actually removing friction, and not just adding. Not trying to pick on you too much, Yalda, but maybe I'll come to you first again. What are you kind of seeing in the marketing scape where we're actually able to remove friction?
Absolutely. So what we've seen for the past decade or so is that digital marketing at the dealer level, first of all, is very, very well adapted. And dealers are utilizing quite a large number of tools. We just mentioned that. But they have been outsourcing. And by doing so, they have been picking up the best of what they find. As a result, they have an agency that's supporting them with their, paid search, one that's helping them with their website, one's that's helping them with their SEO, and or their business development center, etc. And each one of them is creating this silo and not really talking to each other. Really, the dealer is writing the check and they're managing the vendor. With this model, what's worked really well is they were able to access very sophisticated tools. They were able to be in market and test a lot of really, great technology without having to build that in-house. However, what's failed is that dealers have been renting their marketing instead of operating it. And they don't own the data and they can't really manage their audiences or make sure that there is interconnection and dependency of understanding the customer's intent, understanding what's converting, understanding the long-term, strategy of keeping the customer engaged or insight that we're getting from a customer. Say customers calling in for a service appointment and understanding that the service actually is a trigger to a lot of other insight. That has been missing. So I actually think that technology nowadays makes this possible with the proper handling of data, with connecting these signals. You have the ability to leverage data and to really make marketing work.
So kind of what I'm hearing you say is like it's the ability to actually now replicate that model where you could maybe do it once, like you're saying. You might be able to rent or do that activity one time, but the ability to look at it and then replicate, repeat, rinse, repeat is kind of the new paradigm that you're seeing. More dealers are able to explore do this well and over some duration. Is that kind of the right read?
Yeah, absolutely. And they can connect the data. The signals and the data can actually really help augment what's happening. As an example, for commercial vehicles, a customer, just a lead is not just a lead. And if that customer, that data is not really properly routed to the right place, to the right individual in dealership, or the insight that's gained from the prospect is not properly utilized, then you lose the customer.
Yeah, exactly. And we always think, again, for commercial leads, that could be a buyer that's buying a couple vehicles a quarter, a year, right? That the customer lifetime value can be a lot different in our space than the retail side. So, you were mentioning a little bit about the kind of the right leads. So I was curious, Alyssa, like when you're thinking about the search landscape sort of changing. A lot of it has always been around, there's always the balance, I guess, in automotive between quality of leads and quantity of leads. And so, I think we feel this, or we're looking at this and exploring this, but what do you see on, and this can be even broader than automotive, but this paradigm between quality and quantity of leads and how search is being impacted from, less traffic or more contextual traffic coming to the site?
Yeah, I think it's a huge shift, and it changes the downstream impact as well. It's Samee saying that speed to lead, what you actually do with that different type of pre-qualified lead needs to be treated differently. So I think when you're looking more of that top of funnel, how buyers are actually showing up nowadays is that they are more pre-qualified than they would have been in the past. And because of AI, a lot of that research and filtering that kind of used to happen across multiple sites is now happening even before you're getting that direct click. And buyers are asking more detailed questions. They're asking more specific constraint-based focuses, and they're getting those synthesized answers in return, which means they're doing a lot of their own qualification, and they come in with a very different mindset, with very different context, even if they're coming in from a lot of the same physical locations or pages or access points, whether those are lead forms or whatever. By the time that they actually land on those pages, they're not starting from scratch, and they do already have a really clear sense of what they need and what fits, and that impacts that workflow. So instead of handling more of that high volume of those maybe lower intent leads or those tire kickers, dealerships have maybe fewer leads that are coming in from these specific engines. Of course, there are still many other ways. We know physical entry points and in those marketplaces that still drive a lot of those leads. But when they're coming in from an AI-driven conversation or experience, the friction is really removed there. And so it is a higher intent lead. There's less early stage back and forth. There's less figuring out those budgets or basic fits. And that's already been shaped by how that buyer really showed up and searched and qualified themselves. And then that opportunity really becomes not just capturing those leads, but how are those leads then being nurtured within that given context? Buyers are a lot smarter these days. They have more of this information at their fingertips. And so it's a very different type of intent and workflow that then needs to be built off of that, early discovery and entry.
Yeah. And I guess maybe in my head, and maybe Samee, you can touch on this a little bit, like you can imagine, again, you've got that rich contextual search shop experience, which I still think, at least what we see it is, it's still the minority of traffic. Like Google still is the leader. No, there's some of that contextual detail there that's being discovered. It's certainly lighter than if you were in a Perplexity or a GPT or a Claw or what have you. But do you see any of that context carrying forward in some of the workflows that you guys think about bringing forward to dealers? And how do you basically, how do you meet the customer where they're at? When you hear from Alyssa, you've got this rich detail. How do you make sure that lead then kind of feels like I'm being picked up and met where there's real creative value?
It's a great question, and it actually leads us to the highest converting segment of customers. And so we've seen is we've had dealers use PAM to, and they've constructed their own, service marketing agents, on top of our platform that are fit for example, let's say like telematics leads, right? Maybe this is even more important with fleets, right? That is commercial vehicles, their uptime is critical. And as soon as the car is essentially telling them that something needs to be fixed, feeding that then into the marketing system so that immediately we see that signal, the customer's seeing that signal, and now they're getting an outbound from the dealer that they're used to say, hey, let's go get that fixed now. And I can actually, with a few turns of conversation, whether it's on a phone call or a text, get you scheduled, right? That leads to what we've seen, over 50% conversion for those segments of customers, right? I mean, this is unheard of, right? If you had 3% conversion in a typical digital marketing space, you'd be happy. 50% is next level. And so that type of personalization you couldn't get before. Now you actually can. And even better, if it's integrated, right, into your CRM system, like a WorkTruck Solutions, then you can also just have that AI do the booking end to end, all without a human having to be in the loop if they don't need to be.
Yeah, and I presume you've got a lot of that context already. You've got the vehicle, you've got details from it, you've got what that next service might be. So even from the customer experience lens, it's a lot less friction there on what do I need to do, how much context do I need to give you to get to something that's meaningful. So yeah, very, very, very powerful stuff to make those experiences better, which I think that's really if all the dealers that we talk to, I think that's one of the things, especially in commercial, again, a lot longer customer lifetime value, really nurturing that customer the way that they need, not just through an automation at mass scale, but really individual automation is really the holy grail that everyone would like to get to. So
yeah, and just to jump in on that too quickly, I think we are kind of speaking about these three phases kind of in a silo, but I think so much of that actual experience does then get kind of fed back into this loop of, at least within these AI systems, sentiment is a huge piece of that. And if that customer experience is really positive or really negative, those additional signals from that ecosystem also feed in. So, I've been talking about showing up, but if you're showing up in a negative light, that's also not great. And so making sure that, all of that really is cohesive within those strategies. I think, to Yalda's point, connecting the dots between all these different data segments is the reality. Is most marketing systems are not working in, one-off branches. They do really need to have that, collaborative strategy in order to get the end performance results.
100%. Alex, could I add here as well that Yalda's point, this has been the substrate and a lot of things that Yalda's mentioning, which is like, it needs to all be connected. You can't have these different silos. And we've seen this time and again, where on the inbound side, we'll have, folks calling in, say, hey, I got this message and I wanted to talk to my advisor about this. Okay. And then we go send that over to the advisor. The advisor has no idea what we're talking about, right? And they're not equipped to have that conversation. When you have an AI system that's doing the marketing and then the same system doing the inbound, you're able to have seamless conversations, right? And really give the customer that same level of experience that they deserve.
Yeah, I'd like to add here as well. And I think there's three things that AI provides a lot of efficiencies for dealerships, and starting with data ownership and investing in the personnel in store and offering training. But using AI, as efficient as it makes the store, needs to come with some guardrails. I think it's important to have that connection. So there's three things in my opinion, and I'd love the panelists' input on that. Ownership is important. You have to have somebody at the dealership that's trained, that is stepping in and owning the various systems and making sure that, it's just not running on its own. Secondly, we've all had experiences where the machine gets better, provides a lot of efficiencies, but needs oversight. Secondly, I think there's a point of escalation that cannot be handled by AI and needs to really be handled by the human personnel in store. You don't want to have a customer who's frustrated to be handled, whereas you can do a lot of the rote things with AI and get very efficient, get very intentional, drive conversions that you're intending to do. But when it comes to escalation, you have to have a point to do the handoff. And thirdly, I think the data needs to be connected and needs to learn and needs to inform all the other systems. So the customer doesn't receive a, trade-in value that's different than a sales offer that is completely, and all of them are AI powered, that is different from, a chat interaction online.
Yeah, all of that, like, I couldn't agree more with, especially sitting in the seat that I have at Work Truck and thinking about how we do this for our own operations. I think there's always parallels to like what dealers and upfitters and certainly OEMs need to think through. Maybe to like get tactical here, because you can talk about these concepts, but sometimes hearing about how you might execute one, sometimes it feels like you're asking me to boil the ocean. There's lots of different moving pieces. So I'm curious to maybe just talk about maybe from experiences we've seen or participated with dealers or OEMs. Like, maybe we can start with this little concept of data ownership. Is there a strategy that we might recommend if you're listening in? To how might you get started so that you don't feel like, wow, this is a lot to try to go figure out. I like it, I want it, but I don't know how to take that first or second move to get going. Does anybody have is there a point that where you would say, hey, I think the best first step might be, do you need to go get a data provider? Do you need to think about, hey, you need data extraction from your CRM into a data warehouse that you kind of own, oversee, that's yours, that gives you some extensibility? Or what might you recommend as a first step?
Let me jump in. I'll start and definitely want feedback from both Alyssa and Samee. From my perspective, I see a lot of dealers that have spent now over a decade recruiting and having personnel in store who are very good at what they do, but they now need to be basically empowered and trained to make decisions and not just manage vendors. So, in my opinion, it just the personnel who's now been in store should be empowered and trained to run AI. So it would be personnel and training. Secondly, I would say it's around the data and the CRM. The dealers' data in their CRM, in their DMS, etc., is oftentimes not very clean. And if you automate and put in AI on top of data that's not really clean and not really good, the process in store, you're now making very fast decisions multiple times what a human could do and making errors. And so with that, you are just almost empowering everything to go wrong. So I think investing in the personnel and offering training and investing in the data that they have, not introducing a new system, but cleaning that would be foundational. And from there, just simply look at the data and automating the various points and being able to ask the right questions before taking it all in would be my approach.
So I'm curious on your, do you kind of agree? I feel like you're deploying tools that would sit across this potentially messy data. Do you guys have to get involved in that, or do you normally see dealers have gotten that addressed before you've arrived?
Yeah, well, first, I would never disagree with Yalda. She's definitely way smarter than I am. And I think AI is only as good as the data that it's given, right? I mean, I think this is clear. And so more work we put up front to get that, pristine data set, that the better results we're going to see from the AI. I also, have seen like this idea of how do we take a bite, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time, right? So how do we take our first bite here? What I've seen is let's take that segment of data that we do feel good about, right? For example, let's look at our customers on the service side who run fleets, and we know that a few of them are a bit overdue, right? We know what their driving histories may be based on their business, and we know they haven't come in let's say 3 months, and that's a little too long, where they should be coming in every 2. Let's just go out, even if it's a list of 1,000, 2,000 people. It doesn't have to be a ginormous list, but you also don't need to be afraid by how big the list is. And let's go out there and just give them a reminder, right? We know these tickets can get bigger because these are fleets. They're not necessarily as cost sensitive as retail, but also that the work they may need may be more intensive. The ROI that you will see from running a list of just 1,000 folks who just are due for their next service is astronomical, right? We saw this on the retail side where we had a dealer in Chicago where he thought he was at capacity. He's like, I'm doing as good as I think I could do, right? But he wanted to put it to the test, and so he had Pam just off of 2,000 events over the course of 2 months. And had Pam go out there with various offers and contacting these folks integrated into their scheduler so that they could go and have that seamless conversation. He generated $300,000 of service revenue, incremental, directly attributable to the AI. And he was blown away, right? That level of ROI is really hard to come by. And it's sitting there. It's basically found money. If one is, willing and able to go and get it.
Yeah. Wow. 300. And that's somebody who's like sitting there saying, I'm good. I've got it. Like I'm doing what I can. So that's got to be a good feeling on both sides, right? He's got a nice take internally to the team, and you've certainly shown up well. So and then maybe I guess Alyssa, from your vantage, like especially as we've talked through a little bit on the GEO side, like are there techniques that you're recommending to a lot of the clients now to, say as I like what Samee said, take a bite out of the elephant? Like how would you think about approaching so that you just show up better in those contexts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different type of data, but still, data back looking at some of the the existing inventory data that a lot of dealers already are sitting on, but aren't really making work for them. And I think, especially when we're talking about AI, I think there's so many conversations around a content strategy. And, are we asking AI to now generate thousands of blogs about, whatever, all of the different inventory you have, all the different vehicles? I don't think that's the first move by any means. I think there's a lot of potential negatives with that. But I think what you can do with your existing inventory data is that right now those are really treated separately from content. Content is blogs, content is guides, while the actual vehicles are just like listed in a really spec heavy or manufacturer driven format. And in kind of some of these newer opportunities within these conversations, that really flips. And so pretty much every dealership has that structured data feed of their inventory already. And that's really a gold mine of content. It's super rich. It has vehicle specs, features, pricing, all of that information on it. But a lot of the times that data is either internal, it's really spec heavy, it's not accessible, it's buried in like PDFs or an internalized catalog that these engines and AI bots just can't even access or understand or parse through. And so from a discovery standpoint, it's basically invisible. And that's super valuable information that's not even getting accessed or shown in any of these, high intent conversations. And so by making that more manufacturer spoken spec list focused around use cases, around, any of those descriptions, not just the vehicle, but, what it's for, who it's for, what conditions under it works. That's really where you can gain a lot of that kind of lock in within those conversations, and also just making it more accessible so that it can be understood and accessed, so that you can make those short lists that I was talking about earlier. So it stops being more of that, spec sheet, and more so answering those specific questions that users are having more and more of. Is this actually the right fit for what I need? Because you're going to have different users, different buyers searching in very different ways. And one vehicle can answer, 5 different needs, but only if it's positioned for those 5 different needs, whether that's more of like a vocational lens, maybe that's more of a, what actual the different specs of it are. But if you're only listing it as, a manufacturer name, you're not being able to kind of milk it for all of the opportunities that are actually built out of that. And so it really helps your inventory get discovered. You're not going to rely on these maybe other content pieces that aren't connected to your actual inventory structure, so that when leads are coming in, they're actually coming in for those specific use cases, for those specific needs that can also then, go back to the quality of leads that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and you're speaking my language. I mean, we do a little bit of prep for these, as I'm sure everybody is aware. But like, I couldn't have planted a better response there, because that's what we pride ourselves every day on, like helping dealers get all of that rich data. There's a huge capital investment made in a commercial vehicle that oftentimes sits on the lot far too long. But being able to have rich spec data that then can tie into these vocational searches and the contextual searches, I think is an area that we're really proud about. The work we've been doing far before it was going to be leveraged in this kind of capacity, but we're certainly prepared for the day. Then maybe I'll do a complete 180 here a little bit and talk. Maybe I'm curious to hear everybody's take, if they have one, on areas where marketing tends to get a nice little chunk of money, but it doesn't mean it's always deployed appropriately or most efficiently, right? Maybe it's still generating some good return, but maybe not optimal returns. So just maybe, from each of our perspectives, any areas where you're seeing dealers or clients at large kind of maybe thinking about marketing a little bit inefficiently, areas where you would say, hey, think about dialing back budget or effort here and applying it there to get a better return. Anybody have a take on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Samee.
Go ahead, Yalda.
Okay,
You,
I'll
please.
start. I mean, the one. Thank you. The one thing I was going to say is that marketing spend is not insignificant in dealerships, and right now with at any time, dealers are savvy business people, and they manage their business tightly. And so when marketing is such a big line item, it demands attention. One of the challenges that I've seen time and time again is the opacity on the data and the lack of clear delineation and clear attribution, if you will, of the marketing spend and return on ad spend. One of the things that would go a long way is being able to actually use technology to be able to align and clean the data, to be able to truly show value and the return on what's working. And beyond that, I also think there's a delay. Typically, marketing spend is put in market, and then you don't really see anything for at least 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks, to see, are we getting anything? Are the signals coming yet? And how do you attribute it when the customer now interacted with quite a few tools and when you're working with 18 to 25 vendors? So alignment of data would actually help dealers spend a lot less because maybe they're just double spending in some areas and not really seeing the results. Samee, back to you, and I apologize for cutting it.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, efficiency is something that we can actually reasonably approach, right? It's always been a spray and pray approach, right? You just need to put a lot of dollars into top of funnel, and we know that the funnel math is going to get us the somewhat predictable results at the end of it. Now, what we can do, to Yalda's point, is we can go look at exactly what the right data sets are, who are the right customers to target, rather, and then go and get the most ROI, for the least dollar in. And to the point that I brought up earlier, I mean, 2,000 VINs to get $300,000, it's pretty incredible. And to that point, imagine what it would take to get a human to do, or get humans to do something similar, right? I mean, I was talking with a firm, one of the agencies that Yalda, was alluding to, and in order to hit 10,000 VINs, so the dealer wanted to hit 10,000 VINs. They're an unprofitable store, and they knew they had to go and mine whatever they could from their customer list. They got a quote. It was $16,000 for a team, a human-run B2C team, to go and contact all those people. The equivalent cost on an AI solution, it's at least a fourth of that, right? $4,000. And you're still going to get a ton of conversion out of that. And more so, you're going to hit all 10,000 probably in the first week. And then you'll be able to go and close them even sooner. So your cash, conversion cycle also speeds up, which is incredibly important. So I think the opportunities for efficiency we've never really seen this before. And it's uniquely enabled today because of AI.
It does. I do spend a little bit of time thinking the BDC is definitely under some pressure, I would say, from everything that's out there because of how consistent, clear, timely, and then personalized that these tools are going to make the day-to-day life. It's going to be tough out there to justify the same rate card that has historically been out there for sure. Alyssa, anything? I don't want to skip over you, but anything on that here?
No, I just think, going back to what Yalda was mentioning in terms of the actual targeting and maybe, double counting that's happening within a lot of these, multi-channel runners. I think, this is actually where AI can, potentially have some downsides with some of that, because I think a lot of targeting is still done in a very historical manner of going after, what those top of funnel, super high search volume, really large swaths of area that you're kind of, like Samee said, spray and pray. But a lot of that is no longer driving traffic. CTRs are down 30-40% year over year at this point. And so if you're still using those same outdated metrics to really target those users, whether you're doing that from a paid perspective or you're optimizing organically your campaigns, you're not bringing in those high intent users. They're getting caught in those AI overviews on Google. They're not actually clicking through. That's not going to do any value for you. And so really adjusting, what that targeting looks like to focus on, again, those more long tail, those more specific, those niche, those pre-qualified higher intent users, that's really where the value is going to come in. And maybe, when you're looking at the actual search volume numbers, it doesn't look like the same big bucket as these super, super high value terms, but they are going to be much higher value for you down funnel and when you're actually getting to converting those users. And you can find that actually maybe like a group of 10 targeted terms that are really long tail are actually driving the majority of your business compared to these giant high value terms from a couple of years ago.
It makes a ton of sense and somewhat related, but I'm curious, maybe this is a selfish question, but how do you guys recommend for dealerships budgets, marketing budgets can vary even though they can be material, but certainly we find, at least when I'm chatting with lots of dealers, the commercial marketing budget is a lot different than the retail marketing budget, sometimes unfairly so. When you're thinking about how to optimize that spend, would you recommend, hey, be in a few channels as a better strategy than focusing in on one and really optimizing it? Or would you think more about shifting some budget if you need to augment that with some of that niche, that long tail content that, maybe you need help creating? Or how would you think about just that kind of right media mix if your budget is a little tighter?
Yeah, I mean, the SEO in me has to answer it depends. That's always going to be the go-to, but I think really it is super nuanced based on what the data is saying. It's not cookie cutter, it's not one size fits all strategy. And I mean, at Power Digital, we have a ton of different, strategies that we run to actually assess just that and what that, match market testing looks like, where those opportunities are, if there are higher, returns in certain areas or channels versus others, what those audiences look like, because it's not just the channel mix, it's also how you're utilizing those channels, what funnel stages, what audience, and how that ties back to your goals as a brand at the end of the day, what that actually looks like. Do you have, certain vehicles that have been sitting on the lot a little bit too long that you want to focus on more this month that maybe are going to be very different a year from now? And so all of that comes into play. I think it is dangerous to rely on one channel and one channel only, because if something shifts within that, you are totally kneecapping your strategy. And I think the best brands do have this wider ecosystem, and especially as AI is getting more and more involved in so many of these different areas. AI isn't just pulling from your website or, your, paid accounts or anything like that. It is really aggregating your entire digital footprint. And if you're not showing up in some of those channels and, some of your competitors are, they might steal some of that share. And so I don't think it should be even across the board by any means, but having at least some awareness of these other channels, even if it's not your primary focus, is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So we've got about 10 minutes left. So for those listening, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to start dropping them in, and we'll do our best to answer those, should there be any. And maybe just to kind of wrap through, I got a couple of more rapid fire type of questions. Curious for the group's take on maybe a dealership role. I think I might know the answer to this based on the conversation today, but just like a dealership role that might look completely different than what we have assumed it to be today, or maybe doesn't even exist over the next 12 to 24 months. Is there one that kind of sticks out?
Wow.
Is that too much of a hot question? Is it going to be leave you with the hot take?
Maybe I'll say this is just in the way that we've seen deployments go. Are there folks who take an opportunity to lighten their staff? I'd say yes. I don't think we'd never try to position the opportunity that way. We think it's always about doing more. And when there's more, you always need more hands to service that business. And so, I do think the marketing director, or even the service director in many cases, looks different because they're just able to do way more. They're able to take their best practices, just distill it into the AI and get the AI to go do what they could never get their team to do, no matter how hard they try. And I think the job of curating data and getting those lists segmented and all that is also going to eventually transition to the AI. You're going to tell it what works, and it's just going to go out and find out what it should action on for you.
I mentioned this, but I'll repeat it. I think that in the leaders have the personnel, and I think the role of that personnel will change. Like, for example, the internet manager and the marketing team will switch from being vendor managers to actual marketers. And the GMs can have access to real-time data to be able to really question and manage workflow instead of just retroactively looking at results and developing a tactic for the following months.
Yeah, I think that's that's what or if you hear these, the way I interpret this is similar to how we're thinking about our business, which is like, do you need this more general purpose, like AI operator at your business that is helping, because AI is affecting every department. If you're sales, service, marketing, product technology, right? All of these, but there's all of this enterprise value and agents and skills and domain knowledge, and like, where does that live? Yalda, you mentioned data and getting that cleaned up. Like, who's helping quarterback all that? So I could definitely see that's where my bet is that you're going to need some sort of quarterback at the dealership that has that, to your point, that technical expertise, and then can help work through the different functional areas, and then make sure that knowledge stays within the dealership, because there's going to be a decent investment, and that should actually help. One of the big issues for dealers has always been retention of employees, and so this should be a way to help the retention of that digital employee that you mentioned, Samee, that workforce that is going to being created. Maybe if for those listening, if they leave this meeting tomorrow, maybe Monday, one thing that you might recommend they take a look at, even if it's not take action, just like maybe take a look at, double check if there's something you could do or should do, based on the conversation we had today.
I would say take inventory of all the entities that access your data, and also take inventory of what you're paying to access your own data at a dealer level. And that would be a really interesting exercise, because as I've done this with dealers, it is a little bit mind-boggling to see the number of vendors that look at the data, but then charge the dealer to use the same data without really interconnecting the dots, and creating a lot of inefficiency by doing so.
Yeah, I would say just look at your inventory feed, see if that's even widely accessible. Is that internal only? If there's anything proprietary on it, you can scrape that out. But really just making sure that it is accessible and format, and adding some contextual clues to that, adding some who this is for, what purpose it serves. You don't need to build out an entire content strategy. You have so much content already. You just don't call it content. And I think that's the lowest hanging fruit for a lot of these dealers.
Yeah, maybe not to be overly, reflective, but this is a time of reflection, right? We're in a time of major change. And I think the thing that I think about, and maybe speaking like leader to leaders in the room, is what do you know about how to do your job well, how to do the job well, the expert knowledge that you have, that you've earned over many years of experience, and what is the gap between that and what you're seeing with the team, and identifying that, and then obviously continuing to try to up-level your team, but to then think about, how could I get an AI to help me bridge this gap? That's what I'm doing internally in my business. That's what we're doing with every dealer that we're working with. And it feels that now is the time that we can actually bridge that in a meaningful way.
I love that. Because that does hit home for me, at least. Like, you can really you can sit there and think for 10 minutes, and you can find 2 or 3 examples where that's absolutely true, and gives you an opportunity to go try. Because I think that's this moment. If you're not trying, if you're not exploring what could be, because things are changing quickly. So what once maybe felt futile 6 months ago should be certainly retried at this moment. You're likely leaving something on the table. So I didn't see any questions come in. We're just about at time here. So I think I just want to, again, thank everybody for showing up today to this session. To our panelists, I appreciate the thoughtful conversation, and I hope everybody took something away that they can bring back into their dealership, their upfitter, their OEM, wherever you may be.